Welcome to Water Talk with Paul the Waterman, brought to you by Water Pros. Paul the Waterman is Colorado's expert on all things related to the water we use and drink in our homes. Have you ever thought about where your water actually comes from? Is it safe to drink? Is it harmful to my health, my skin, or my hair? Paul the Waterman knows water, and he has the answers. So get ready to talk to the Waterman yourself right now. Call in with your questions to talk with your host, Paul the Waterman.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. I hope everyone is having a great Thursday. Happy to be here with you. So in the last couple shows, we've covered a lot of information, and I kind of want to do a recap because there's so much information out there, and I think it's really important that we understand that the quality of our water, not only is it important to everyday life, from humans' consumption, we need to drink water. The animals need to drink water. The plants need to drink water. So really, life is all about water, isn't it? And one of the things that I'm concerned about is, you remember we talked about the forever chemicals, the PFAS? Now, I'm beginning to think, guys, that everything that's contaminated in our water is like a forever chemical. It doesn't go away. For example, we're going to talk today about dioxin, and we're also going to talk today about a contaminant called 1,4-dioxane. And these are contaminants that I believe are just like PFAS. They're in our water supply, and they stay in our water supply. They don't disappear. We're also going to talk about disinfection byproducts that are in our water supply. These are chemicals used basically to treat the water as it leaves the waste treatment plant, and then it's entered back into the same body of water that the water's drawn from. So everybody is technically in a state of reusable water. And what that means is that as soon as it leaves the waste treatment plant and it goes back into the body of water that it was drawn from, somebody else, some other municipality, is taking it right back out. And in Castle Rock, right now, Castle Rock Municipality is 35% reusable water, and that's going to increase because in a short period of time, the Douglas County projects that Castle Rock and surrounding areas are going to add another 60,000 users to its water system. 60,000. So infrastructure is something else that I think is going to, be a consideration. We have a topic. Remember Mike, the nice fellow that we had on air and we interviewed and gave us some really, helpful insight and information? He shared something with me I want to share with you. So everybody in the news, you heard about Mr. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr., wants to phase out artificial food dyes. And one of them that he wants to phase out is called Red 40, also known as Allura Red AC. It's a synthetic food dye that can be found in wastewater. The presence of Red 40 in wastewater is a concern due to its potential adverse effects, including DNA damage and inflammation. And in fact, it can alter the structure of brain cells, potentially impacting memory, attention, and learning. Now, did you understand what we just said right there? That's serious. Why would they use a food additive that could create a synthetic food dye that could affect and cause DNA damage? DNA. That's basically your structure of life is DNA, right? That's what makes who you are, is your DNA. It can also cause inflammation. It can cause damage to the brain that could impact memory and attention and learning. And this is something that's in our wastewater. So that's why I say I think every single contamination issue that we're dealing with is basically forever. Remember this. This is a recap. I've shared this before, but I think it speaks volumes to the situation that we're dealing with here. When we first learned about the forever chemicals, now I first learned about them about a year ago, where they started doing a webinar. The EPA sponsored a webinar about the PFAS contamination. And they started out by wanting to limit the maximum contamination of forever chemicals. And now there's over 187 chemicals, and it's probably going to increase, but over 187 chemicals that fall into the PFAS or forever chemical family. So they started out by saying that the maximum contamination level is 1 part per billion. And we played snippets of shows that we shared with you, and we learned that 1 part per billion is 1 drop of contaminant in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That doesn't seem a lot, does it? But that alone is enough to be a contamination concern and a health effect. Then, as the study went on and the summer went on, the EPA changed and said, okay, instead of 1 part per billion, we want to get it down to 4 part per trillion. Part per trillion. That's pretty small. You got 1 part per billion, and then now they want it down to 4 part per trillion. And then by the end of their webinar series for contamination, PFAS contamination, they disclosed that the maximum contamination level for forever chemicals should be 0. Now, the question is, how will our local municipalities be able to remove the forever chemicals from our water supply? Because the EPA, and I haven't seen anything that says this has changed yet, the EPA has until 2029 to eliminate all forever chemicals out of water resources that the municipalities are going to use to provide public water source. You have to, and if they don't meet the standards, then the EPA has the ability to find that public water source or even a private water source. So we know to remove the forever chemicals, we can use granular activated carbon. We could use reverse osmosis membranes. We can use anion resin filtration. Now, let's think about this, and here's the recap. So when you have a municipal water source and they're taking out all that bad stuff, like the forever chemicals, is there a filtration media setup or system that they can properly put in place? And what that means is if you're trying to treat water and you're having it come through a 3-inch or a 6-inch water main, can you imagine the flow rate? We're talking several hundred gallons per minute. So you would have to have a water filtration system that could filter several hundred gallons per minute, and that has to be a monstrous size. But then the problem is, what are you going to do with the wastewater? And the wastewater comes from that filtration media. It's going to have to be cleaned. It's going to have to be rinsed. We used an example of there's some municipal water sources here locally in the metro area that use giant reverse osmosis filtration systems. But one of the problems is what do you do with the wastewater from a reverse osmosis filtration system? So the wastewater is going to be all those chemical contaminants that they remove. One thing that we found out, and it really shocked me, is that in some cases they will drill a hole right into an aquifer and inject all that wastewater into an aquifer. Thus, they refill the aquifer, but they're refilling the aquifer with contaminated water. So when you're talking about water filtration, and we're talking about water filtration on a grand scale, a municipality can only do so much. And the problem is, and the reason why they can only do so much is because we create a bigger issue. If we're trying to have them do water filtration, the wastewater alone. So what wastewater is when you use a filtration media like granular activated carbon, reverse osmosis, or even anion resin, you're going to have a waste byproduct because that media will have to be refreshed, will have to be rinsed. It's not like one big giant sponge. And so because of that, then you have to figure out what you're going to do with all that basically contaminated water. So right now what a waste treatment plant does is that they do their very best to remove certain contaminants. Others they can't. So then what they do is they try to disinfect the contaminant by using chlorine or chloramine. And that's also designed to break down and destroy bacteria. Now, another thing we learned that I was surprised is that the chlorination, using chlorine or ammonia, the chloramine, it doesn't kill the bacteria, but it sterilizes it. And I thought for sure, I guess by sterilizing it, technically you're killing it. But I thought that was like instant killing of the bacteria. So which makes sense then, why viruses, they would test viruses during COVID. You remember they would walk around, go to a waste treatment plant, and COVID would test positive in the neighborhood at the waste treatment. The reason being then is because it's not 100% foolproof of killing the bacterial virus as it is to sterilize it. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. You can give me a call here. Our number is 303-477-5600. And the other thing I wanted to cover, going to, is that we also talked about people who live on well water. And you remember last week I was mentioning that we had a guest on that is renting a home and his quality of water is not sustainable or is not acceptable to certain EPA drinking water standards. And, his landlord was really unwilling to do anything about it. So I called the state health department, and they finally called me back this week. And I had a very nice conversation with him. And it's true. Unfortunately, right now in the state of Colorado, there's no law on the books that mandates that a landlord has to provide safe drinking water. So, as I said last week, I recommend if you're looking at renting and you're going to be moving out to the country and you're going to be moving out to a home that, in the mountains or foothills, anywhere that has a well, I would A, get the water tested, B, based upon the water quality, have it written in the lease that the landlord is going to help you with water quality or water filtration mitigation, or give you permission to put in a water filtration system if needed. We were in a home outside of Wellington, Pierce, Colorado. It's a rental property, and the iron content was so bad that it was ruining the renter's washing machine. And, it was creating orange staining all over the place. It was just a mess. And this landlord was kind enough to say, yeah, hey, let's do something about it. Which is good, and because the landlord knows that, water like that is not only going to ruin the renter's wash machine, but it's also going to play havoc on the hot water heater. It's going to ruin the dishwasher. It's going to plug up the plumbing, and it's going to attack the bathroom, tile in the tub, and it's going to stain everything. So it's something that it's in the landlord's benefit to treat the problem, because it's going to save, overall and long-term maintenance. So my strong recommendation is anybody that's renting and you're on well water, I would absolutely have it in your lease, something that addresses the water quality and the landlord willing to accept responsibility to ensure that you have, safe, good, clean drinking water. And two things you have to worry about when you're on well water is the total dissolved solid level. You want to make sure that that's below 500. That's the EPA standard. And you also want to make sure it's free from coliform bacteria, because coliform bacteria is a precursor to other contaminants as well. So just keep that in mind. And I think in today's landscape, it's an ultra competitive as far as, real estate goes. But I think everybody should insist that they have clean, quality drinking water. Let's take our first time out. We'll be right back.
If you have hard water, smelly water, or water that just tastes bad, improve the quality of your water with the professionals at Water Pros. Water is a precious resource that's a part of everyday life. Harmful cleaners, forever chemicals, microplastics, and pharmaceuticals end up in our water supply, and they don't just magically disappear. Water treatment should not cost tens of thousands of dollars or require long-term financing. For KLZ listeners, a complete Water Pros water treatment system start at only $31.95 installed. See why people are trusting the professionals with Water Pros. Water Pros is a family-owned and veteran-owned business dedicated to providing you the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. Go to waterpros.net today and request your free water test. Or call 303-862-5554. That's 303-862-5554. And ask for the KLZ Listener Special. $31.95 for a whole house water softener and point of use reverse osmosis.
What's in your water? Are you unknowingly drinking hormones, antibiotics, or dangerous chemicals? Paul the Waterman here from Water Pros. Now is the time to have our professionals help you with affordable solutions to be sure your water is free from those contaminants. Call Water Pros today and visit waterpros.net. Toxic chemicals and bacteria last forever in your water if untreated. It's a crucial time to think about the quality of your water to be sure it's safe for you and your family. Call Water Pros today or go to waterpros.net.
Colorado's residents are known for healthy lifestyles, outdoor living, and clean organic eating. 100% Colorado owned and operated Water Pros provide affordable in-home water treatment options. Water Pros can help you with hard water, lead, and forever chemicals in your drinking water. Living organic means eating organic, and eating organic starts with clean water. Learn more about your water and schedule your free consultation today. Waterpros.net. Water Pros. Healthy water means a healthier you.
You're listening to KLZ 560, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. So let's do an exercise together. It's everybody, if you have it, get a clear piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to draw a great big circle. Now, inside that circle, let's say that represents a subdivision where all the homes are on well water. And so you go ahead and fill that circle up with X's, and those X's are going to represent homes. And so when you do that, basically every home has their own well and every home has their own septic and leach field. So one thing that we know about water is when water drains underground, you can't control where it goes. Water has the ability to find its own path. You know, sometimes I think water has its own intelligence. But water will find its own way. And so my point is that as you live in this subdivision with your individual well and your individual, leach field and septic system, don't you think it could be a possibility, especially now in the springtime when we get a heavy rainstorm, that there could be a possibility of cross-contamination, meaning that somebody else's leach field could be in a close proximity to somebody else's well? Why don't you do that? Next time you go home and you live in an area that is a subdivision with everybody has their own well and septic system, take a look at where the leach field is to where your well is. And vice versa for, your neighbors. Because what can happen is when you get heavy moisture, and especially after, let's say a dry period where the ground is a little bit hard and it doesn't, saturate the moisture as quick as it does if we're used to, rainy season, then we can get what's called cross-contamination, meaning that the water from somebody else's leach field and septic system can go right into your well, could get right into the well cavity or your own little aquifer. So your own little aquifer, what I mean by that is that everybody that you drill a well depths can vary from as deep as 900 feet to 300 feet. So I call that little cavity where your pump is set, it's called that a little cavity that accesses the aquifer where your water comes from. You have a casing, a steel casing that goes so far that, in depth, the casing that basically it sticks above ground that you see, mainly, cast iron steel, that doesn't go to the whole depth of the well. And so your well pump is set basically below that casing. So, in theory, you could have contamination. And when you have contamination, it could be in the form of coliform bacteria. So that's something to consider. I think everybody should think about that lives out in well water and that lives in a subdivision, that we're talking about, should think about using a whole house a whole house ultraviolet light filtration system. A UV, I think, is a smart thing to have when you're on well water in a community like that. I think well water, applications, you should get your water tested once a year. Well water quality can change. It will not stay the same. In the 30 plus years I've been here in Colorado, and wait a minute, this reminds me, I want to say hi to some folks. There's Robbie and JD. They worked for a company years ago, and when I worked for them, this was a long, long time ago. They were known as Pyramid Water Systems. But I want to say hi to the folks at AquaServe. They are a competitor, I will say that, but they're a great bunch of people, and I do love working with them because they provide me with wholesale products. I like using local people, so I just wanted to say hi to them and thank you to everybody at AquaServe for all the great service that you help with Water Pros. So I wanted to say hi to those guys before I forget. But one of the things that back to my topic here, we have to take the blinders off and not assume that my water's safe, and we have to take the common sense approach. And when you're in a neighborhood like that, you really should stop and pay attention and look at where your well is compared to somebody else's leach field and septic system and see if there's a possibility. And if you do have coliform bacteria, that could be the source of it. We were at a home outside of Castle Rock where coliform bacteria is present. And that could also be, an agricultural issue with farm animals. And it could be a scenario where, if you had, long-term, animal usage where there was grazing or even where we call livestock pens, you could be a scenario where, groundwater contamination could get into your well. I mean, that's absolutely, a possibility, a plausibility. So they have coliform bacteria. They have iron content, they have hardness, there's smelly water. We're going to help them out. We're going to put in a dual tank matrix system. The matrix, or which is where we use KDF85 activated carbon in the top chamber and resin in the bottom chamber. And when you're in well water, you want to use a dual tank system because during when you're doing water treatment or water filtration, think about this. A lot of other companies out there like putting single tank systems in. You have a single tank water softener, then you have a single tank filter for the iron content, you have a single tank filter for the sulfur. And out of all three of those units, what type of water do they use in the cleaning cycle? So a water filter system, by any kind of backwashing filter system, what kind of water do they use when you're a single tank? The same dirty water. It doesn't make sense, does it? So your water softener is going to get upside down because it's using the same dirty water to try to clean itself, and so that doesn't work very well. And then you have the iron system where you're trying to clean out ferrous iron, and the filter media that you use in these iron filter systems are usually pretty heavy. So there's no lift, there's no agitation of that filter media. Same with the sulfur system. And so what happens is that all three of these units fail because they use the same dirty, stinky water to try to rinse themselves with. And then you end up getting more contamination accumulation coming out of that filter media than what's coming out of your well by itself. So we have a dual tank multimedia system. The KDF85 inactivated carbon will help with the stinky sulfur smell, also will help with the iron. Resin loves ferrous iron and hardness. And then the other thing we do differently is that when we go through the cleaning process or the cleaning cycle, we do what's called counter current regeneration. And what does that mean? So normally a filtration system cleans from the top to the bottom. And as it gets to the bottom, it goes through a little distributor tube and goes into your home. So when we go through a cleaning cycle, we actually filter the media from the bottom to the top. So then that means that the activated carbon, the KDF85, will get cleaned in soft water, and all the contaminants will help get rinsed off and flushed down the drain. And so that's something that, adds in successful filtration, eliminating the smell, the iron, and the hardness, but also protects and adds to the lifespan of the filtration media. So in recap, think about cross-contamination. Now, if you when you live in a community in a neighborhood that your own well, everybody has their own well and septic. Now, when you live out in a rural area where you're by yourself and you have distance between your home and somebody else's home, then you really need to think about and consider what's filling up my aquifer. Because that's something that I never thought about. And 2 weeks ago, when Mike was able to basically tell us that they inject the water right into the ground to fill up aquifers, the water they're injecting is dirty, contaminated water. Think about them, anything that goes from the waste treatment plant and it goes right back to the Platte or goes right back to another body of water. This is disinfection byproducts. Now, we've used this brochure before, this pamphlet from the EPA. It's called the National Primary Drinking Water Regulations. And when I turn to disinfection byproducts, the first thing that comes is called bromate. And bromate cause an increased risk of cancer, potentially health effects from long-term exposure. So there's no minimum or maximum contamination level. It's basically at 0 is what recommended. And it's a byproduct of drinking water disinfection. So let's go to a water quality report that I have that's from an estate out, let's say in Brighton area, out east. They're all on a public well. And so the public well means that the homeowners association most likely hires an independent to monitor the well and test the well. And one of the things that I noticed right off the bat from this statement, I guess you can call it a statement, but it's the water quality report, is that they had violations. The violations, they call it non-health-based violations. And I'll read it right off this paper. It says, these violations do not usually mean there was a problem with water quality. Listen to the wording, usually mean. If there had been, we would have notified you immediately. And so what they did is they missed collecting samples, water quality, and reporting the samples results after the due date. So apparently, when you run a municipality water supply, and it says, the state says anything that has 15 or more homes, then you technically qualify as a municipal water supply. And so what happens there is that you have to, monitor the water and send in the samples and then, get the results. And when you fail to do that, then you're in violation. And some of the sampling or testing that they were laid on were for volatile organics, synthetic organics, public notice, failure to notify the public consumer. So that means that something happened in the water that they failed to notify the public about. They failed to do a nitrate test, a gross alpha, fluoride group, combined uranium, and combined radium. So these are all things that were supposed to be tested that weren't tested, and then because they weren't tested, they met the deadline, and they also got, in trouble for not notifying the consumer. So anybody that has a HOA that hires someone to monitor your public well, I would definitely pay attention to the water quality report, and I would look through it, and then I would answer the questions. Or ask the questions, the tough questions that need to be answered. So I wanted to share that with you. So when we're talking about water contamination and the quality of our water, and with well water, it's important to realize, again, I'm being repetitive, that every single one of us is technically in a reusable water state. Let's take a quick commercial. We'll be right back.
Forever Chemicals in our water is now a part of our life. Forever Chemicals means that these chemicals don't break down. Call Water Pros for your free in-home evaluation of the concerns of Forever Chemicals and the ways to remove forever chemicals from your family's water supply. Call 303-862-5554 and request your free evaluation, or go to waterpros.net.
With forever chemicals in your water, it's crucial to think about the quality of your water. Paul the Waterman here for Water Pros. Be sure your water is safe with affordable solutions from Water Pros. Visit waterpros.net today.
The EPA is making changes in regulations for water safety because of elevated levels of lead, Gen X, and forever chemicals in water supplies. Locally owned and operated Water Pros has home treatment solutions ready to install today. Water Pros employs the latest technologies and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water, lead in your water, and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary test and consultation now, waterpros.net.
560 KLZ, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. Glad to have you with me this afternoon. So if you're just joining us, let's do a quick recap. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you, and this comes from our friend Mike. He was the fellow that in studio with us a couple weeks ago, and we learned a wealth of information from him. He brought to my attention regarding this food additive, which Robert Kennedy is absolutely trying to do away with. It's the Red 40, also known as Allura Red AC, is a synthetic food dye that can be found in wastewater. The presence of Red 40 in wastewater is a concern due to its potential adverse effects, including potential DNA damage and inflammation, and the fact that it can alter the structure of brain cells, impacting memory, attention, and learning. That's found in wastewater. That's why I said I think everything that's in our water supply technically is forever. Pharmaceuticals. Let's go back. Remember pharmaceuticals. Remember that every single over-the-counter pharmaceutical tests in our drinking water, wastewater systems, every single pharmaceutical, and to the point where even when a new, water system is being, developed. So if you go up in the mountains and you see, go by Granby, is it Granby, Lake Granby? You see those waterways out there where they're drawing water to feed the public. Even those bodies of water, Chatfield, Platte, are testing positive for over-the-counter pharmaceuticals. And it's something that we really need to think about because we've been talking about three main topics. We're talking about the forever chemicals. We're talking about microplastics. The plastics have penetrated. They're now into our brain. They're so small that they're penetrating our brain, meaning they're getting into our brain tissue. So we have nanoplastics that have gone basically in every aspect of human organs, from the reproductive system, the digestive system, and now into our brain. And also they've been found in the arteries that feed our heart. That's pretty scary. And with the other contamination concern that we want to talk about today, hang on, it doesn't want to cooperate with me. Give me 1 second. I want to get to my iPad here. I want to talk about 1,4-dioxin. Here we go. So 1,4-dioxin is something that we mentioned before. It's a synthetic organic compound that was first synthesized in 1863. So since 1863, it's been in our water supply. Historically, it was primarily used as a stabilizer for chlorinated solvents. However, its use has evolved over time, and now it's found as a contaminant in many consumer products. That's the soaps and shampoos and makeup. And yes, 1,4-dioxin can be found in drinking water. So 1,4-dioxin has been used in public applications since the early 20th century, and then in commercial sales since the 1950s. It's widespread. Its use peaked in the mid-'80s. It was used for primary stabilizing other solvents. So this is something that it's been used. It was first used and developed in 1863. Now, when we say the first public water system shortly was developed after that, and it's a contaminant. So you figure 1863, right? 1963, 2063. We're over 200 and almost 230 years of this contamination. being active in our society. So can you imagine the concentration levels that it would be in our water supply, because it doesn't disappear, it doesn't go away. It's a forever chemical. And it's known to be irritating to the skin, eyes, and respiratory tract. More concerning, it can cause serious damage to liver, kidneys with high exposure. So they do not test for 1,4-dioxins. And why do I say that? Because it's an unregulated contaminant by the EPA. And why it's an unregulated contaminant is beyond me. Because they've known about this forever, basically. Dioxins can stay in the body for a very long time, with a half-life estimated between 7 to 10 years. But, if you're always putting it in your body, it's never going to go away. The EPA has classified it as a likely carcinogen, meaning that it could potentially cause cancer. Trace amounts of 1,4-dioxin in products like shampoos, detergents, body washes, and even baby products. Because it's a byproduct in manufacturing, it's not always listed on the ingredient label, making it tricky to avoid. Some of the laundry soap that has 1,4-dioxin is used in my home, and that's Tide and Gain. And then body washes, and 1,4-dioxin is found in Victoria's Secret and Olay. Dish soap is Dawn dish soap, most commonly used. So these are the contaminants, and I just wanted to cover this quickly because, we really need to switch to pure soaps that have no additives or ingredients, just 100% soap. See, water filtration and water treatment and water softening can be a benefit to our water resources. But then, here's the pickle on this. So when we're filtering the water, either at home or let's say we have our municipality filter the water for us, what's going to happen to that wastewater? That wastewater is going back down into the drain. And it goes into the waste treatment plant, and then the waste treatment plant is going to take that same contaminant and put it right back into the body of water where we use it, where we draw it from. So what we're going to have to do is stop using these contaminants and slowly but surely, maybe not for us, but for future generations, create a water source that eventually doesn't have these types of issues to deal with. But it's all going to start by us addressing it today. The microplastic, nanoplastic problem. You know what gets me? Is that it's something that plastic lasts forever. Have you guys take a plastic fork and set it outside? Set it outside and see how long it lasts. And then take a nail and set it right next to it. And see what happens between the nail and the plastic fork. So we need to get rid of plastic wrap. We need to get rid of plastic bottles. We need to get rid of plastic, everything's plastic, the potato chips, come in a form of plastic. And that's something that we have to rethink. Back in the day, when I was a youngster, and during my, mother and father's generation and grandparents' generation, before plastics were widely used, how did they distribute products? It was wrapped in basically wax paper and cardboard, or was in a metal container. So cardboard breaks down, wax paper breaks down, even aluminum foil breaks down, but not plastic. So the mistake is when you do water filtration, and we talked to Mike about this, our guest the other week, when reverse osmosis membranes are nanofiltration. But when you don't pre-treat, reverse osmosis membranes are not designed to filter hard water. Hard water beats them up. And so an RO membrane is wrapped like a roll of paper towels. So look at a roll of paper towels, and as it's wrapped in layers, right? So that's the way the reverse osmosis membrane is. So every layer that the water goes through, the greater the contamination reduction. And then at the center, is a distribution tube where the water goes through. But when you use reverse osmosis membranes to filter out hard water, what happens? The calcium, because you're slowing the water flow rate down, right? It's in, and even these commercial systems, they use a pump to try to basically force the water through. So you figure commercial membrane, osmosis system probably has a electric pump that's pumping the water through about 12 gallons per minute. And then you've got several series of membranes in line. But when the hard water builds up on that membrane and oxidizes, it stays. And so when the plastic hits those calcium deposits, it's not desorbed. They break and get smaller, and then they pass on through the membrane. Or then the membrane starts to disintegrate, and that's how, remember this, when they exposed the bottled water industry for plastics and microplastics, they also, in the articles, every single article I read, also said that they found nylon fibers, which is the reverse osmosis membrane as well. And so that means that the manufacturing practices created this issue. So plastics aren't absorbed when you try to use hard water through reverse osmosis systems. Now, in a residential point of use application, that's the reverse osmosis that goes underneath your kitchen sink. One, you're not using a pump to push the water through, okay? You're letting basically your water pressure, and it goes through a 1/4-inch line, and it's fed naturally. I say naturally, it's not forced. So then the membranes, right, aren't being forced to issue something that they're not designed to. But 2, hard water will still affect their production. 3, if you have hard water, you should change that membrane once a year at minimum based upon your water hardness. So that's where we recommend soft water. Soft water is the first stage in water filtration, because any other filter system supported by soft water will do its job. Hard water is the monster. Hard water destroys everything. Hard water breaks down activated carbon. Hard water can build up on any other filter media, filter system. And let's go back to, we were talking about well water. Well water, people put in filters, and they put in carbon filters, or they put in 5-micron sediment filters. And when you have iron in the water, that iron oxidizes inside that filter housing, and it builds up, and they know they need to change the filter because the water pressure drops. And remember this, well pumps are not designed to push against resistance. That's something that I just want to remind everybody. Well pumps are not designed to push against resistance. So carbon filters, a lot of people I've seen put these big blue filter housings and put carbon filters in, and carbon filters are really great at slowing the water flow down, and really great at having the iron oxidize all over that filter and that filter housing. And then same thing, slows the flow rate down, stresses the pump. So we've talked about a lot today, kind of a recap, and I appreciate everybody's patience with me. But it all starts with us taking the common sense approach when it looks at, looking at our water, possibilities of how our water could be contaminated, and think outside the box. Look at, when you live up in the foothills and, you have well water, the water, goes through basically layers of rocks, cracks in rocks, in the rock formation that basically fill up your cavity. I don't think anybody that lives in the mountains at high elevation can say they have an aquifer. They have a body of water, a pocket that the water's, collected to. And as that water sits in that rock, what happens? It decays the rock. And as it's decaying the rock, that's where you get uranium contamination. One of the things that, I'm very proud of is that we have a lot of folks up in the Cold Creek Canyon area that have high uranium, and we were able to set up, uranium systems that basically got the levels down to non-traceable. And, that's with an aniline system. And then you have to have a water softener, because aniline resin cannot filter out and deal with hard waters. You've got a water softener with an aniline system, and then we also, help out with radon gas. So, Water Pros, we can come up with the right solution. We'll work really hard, and we take the smart approach of let's see what the water quality test, and then, we explain to you, what stage and what process has to be done to be successful. Let's take our final break.
Forever chemicals, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and total chlorine are real contaminants in our water. Clean water is essential for our everyday life. Water is the best flushing agent our bodies can use. We cook with water, we bathe in water, and we grow our food with water. Call Water Pros for your free in-home evaluation. Water Pros can educate you about the concerns of forever chemicals, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and total chlorine, and discuss ways to remove these contaminants from your family's water supply. Call 303-862-5554 and request your free evaluation, or go to waterpros.net to request your free in-home consultation. Water Pros is a family-owned, veteran-owned business dedicated to offering the best solutions to meet the needs of the water concerns we have today. Call 303-862-5554 today or at www.waterpros.net.
What's in your water? Are you concerned about drinking hormones, antibiotics, or dangerous chemicals? Paul the Waterman here from Water Pros. Don't wait to be sure your water is free from those contaminants. Have our professionals help with affordable solutions. Visit waterpros.net today.
This is 560 KLZ, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. Thank you for being with me. So now I'm going to wrap it up today by talking about dioxins. Another contaminant that we should be worried about. Dioxins, Dioxins, have been in our public concern since the late 1970s and early 1980s, especially after health effects. This is something that they used, in Agent Orange, became widely known. The EPA and other regulatory bodies have since worked to reduce dioxin emissions and contamination. There are a group of chemicals related in compounds known as polychlorinated dibenzo P-dioxins. That's a mouthful, isn't it? And see the similarity of the the polychlorinated, where the PFAS are polyfluorinated, I believe. Dioxins are not intentionally produced, but are byproducts of processes like waste incineration, chemical manufacturing, and paper bleaching. So they are highly toxic. And this is something that is also in our water supply. See, that's why I started the show by I said, I think, every single contamination issue or concern that we have today technically is forever. It's a forever concern. Cancer. Dioxins are classified as known as a human carcinogen. Long-term exposure to even low levels of dioxins can increase the risk in developing cancer, reproductive development problems, and so it can cause issues in reduced fertility, developmental issues in the fetus. Pregnant women exposed to dioxins may face higher risk of birth defects. So this is, in the grand scale of things, as I'm reading this and going over this with you now, I really think it's only up to us. Here's something on a side note. If you can go out and get a tax rebate for solar panels, and I even hear you can get a tax rebate if you buy an e-bike, I think they should give us tax rebates to get our own water filtration. So what I was saying earlier in the show, when you have water treatment, water filtration, you're taking out the contaminants, and the contaminants either in your home or at a municipal water, station. The contaminants are going to go somewhere. And so the contaminants at home go down the drain, go to the waste treatment plant. The waste treatment plant takes that contaminant out of the water as they take the solids out. And the solids are the bio-waste. And that's basically put right back into the water resources that, we still draw from. So the only way to stop and quit this nonsense of an ever-evolving cycle of water contamination is to, soft water eliminates the need for a majority of the cleaning products that contaminate our water supply. It cuts back on laundry soaps and cleaners and dishwashing soaps. The other thing is that if we stop the use of plastics, remember we cut that down, then eventually what will happen is we'll gain ground. But this is a generational issue. This is something that's not going to happen overnight. This is something that we have to look at to save our water resources. We really have to have this become a public awareness. If we're coming into a state election cycle, they're talking about, is the governor's race in Colorado is that next year? Are we going to, have a slew of state and local races that we need to, pay attention to? We need to bring this to the forefront. This has to be a topic that's debated. This has to have a game plan. But this is a generational issue. You're not just going to solve this water contamination problem, by simply, doing a filtration system, and try to design a grand filtration system, because then you have the wastewater. It has to be a complete, thorough, thought-through process. I'm wondering if we shouldn't ask for tax credits for water filtration systems in our homes so we can treat our water, because everybody deserves clean water. And then what we have to do is come up with a legitimate, workable process of treating the wastewater that the water treatment plants put back in. Do you remember this? If a water treatment plant, and I believe there's one in Aurora, that uses reverse osmosis technology, and I think there's one in Brighton too. And if you take the byproduct of the reverse osmosis, that dirty water, that's all the contaminant and crud they pulled out of the water, and you inject that in the ground back into an aquifer, are you not contaminating that aquifer? Are you not giving false sense of security? If you don't broadcast this, if you don't put this out to the public, then are you not giving somebody a false sense of security, thinking, hey, I'm in the well water, I got an aquifer, hey, this is great, this is where I'm at the Lower Dawson. This is something that we, has to be discussed. And I wonder if they don't do it because of, creating an alarm issue, public, but everybody needs to know, like the water quality report that I read to you. At least they were honest about it. At least they pointed out they called it non-health based violations, but they listed it. And the one thing that they listed that they didn't elaborate on was public notice, failure to notify the public consumer. And what was that about? And when you fail to test the water in a timely manner, that possibly, a bunch of safety violations you just don't know. You're kind of flying blind. So one of the things about dioxins, let's go back to this real quick, that I want to point out is that they can also affect meat and dairy products, because dioxins accumulate in the fatty tissue of animals. Fish and shellfish, these can be contaminated through water pollution. So it's not only in the drinking water, but it's, same thing in the food that we eat. Certain chlorinated organic compounds can contain dioxins. Backyard burning trash in the backyard releases dioxins into the environment. Well, I remember as a kid, I lived out in the rural area. We didn't have garbage picked up. We had a big trash barrel. So, this is a contamination issue that's been, going on for years. So 1,4-dioxin started in 1863. Forever Chemicals, the PFAS, they first started reporting that and knowing that it was in the human blood in the 1970s. So, now we have the microplastics, the nanoplastics, and then we have the pharmaceuticals. And that's something that we're going to focus on next, is all the pharmaceutical contamination, because we need to know. When you take a medication and then you drink your water, and the water has a medication that could counteract or create a reaction, a negative reaction to the medication that you're taking. And if they overprescribe you think about this. If you take a dietary supplement, and that dietary supplement or medication causes you to have, and you have perfectly high blood pressure. Let me start again. You got great blood pressure, your blood pressure is normal, and then you take a medication to lose weight. And then that medication, one of the side effects is to create high blood pressure. So now you got to take a blood pressure medication. So all the medication that you take, your body expels, and you flush it down the toilet, and it ends up in the water supply. Estrogen is in the water supply because of birth control. So what other pharmaceuticals? We're going to take our team, and we're going to dive into that, and that's going to be our next goal, is to come up with and let you know of the major pharmaceutical contamination that's in the water supply, because it's there and we know it's there, and we have to, pay attention to it. So everything starts with your free water test. Give us a call at 303-862-5554. We'll come out and do a free in-home water test. We'll test for water hardness and total chlorine content. And once again, I was in a home in Aurora, and we did the total chlorine test off of Jewel, I believe. And the chlorine content out of the cold water was a 0.5 part per million, but then the chlorine content coming out of the hot water heater was 1 part per million. So remember, it's a chloramine. It doesn't dissipate. So if it doesn't dissipate, it will build up in that hot water heater. So these are things to consider. So with the water softener helps with the reverse osmosis, and the reverse osmosis system can function properly because it's not going to get occupied or beat up by hard water. Secondly, I'm going to go back and recap and recommend that everybody that's thinking about renting a house on well water, make sure you get a water quality report or water test. Make you test for total dissolved solids. You want to test for E. coli. And understand what the hardness and iron content is, because that's something that if you're not used to it, it's going to be there, and it could be a factor. And if it is a factor, when you go and you look at a home, take the lid off the back of the toilet tank, and the water that you see in that toilet tank is the quality of water that you're going to have. All right, I hear the music. Our time is up. Boy, this is the fastest hour, isn't it? Thank you for listening. Everybody, have a great day.
Remember to reach out to Paul the Waterman with your questions and water filtration needs, and be sure to tune in to Water Talk Thursdays at 2 p.m. to talk with Paul. And for more information, find him on the programming page at klzradio.com.